morning, good evening, good night, wherever or whoever you may be. I am Alan Arante, and this is the Recluse Podcast. Today's guest is Matthew Perez. He is a photographer based in the Ventura County. He has worked with multiple nonprofit humanitarian organizations over the years and has traveled to countries like Cambodia, Sri Lanka, just to name a couple. Matthew has been photographing the recent protests that have been taking place in the Ventura County, including the Oxnard and Ventura marches and protests. We talk about the power in these photos and why it is important to document these events. I ask him about the feelings that come with standing between police officers and a crowd. I'm happy to have made his acquaintance. I can't wait to stand on his new boat, Stimulus, out on the sea. So without further delay, this is a portrait of Matthew Perez.
Who the hell are you? How the hell are you?
First off, I'm great, man. It's definitely hot today, but definitely doing really good. I've been staying busy with the quarantine stuff, but who I am. I'm just simply a 28-year-old kid just trying to figure out life. I do photography and videography as a side job. I work full-time still, but I've been doing photography and videography for quite a while, just doing different types of projects, whether it's been photo shoots or video shoots, weddings, the sound and tech production, just kind of like a techie kind of person. And so kind of got into that field for quite a few years and just kind of been rolling with it and staying extremely busy with COVID and all that.
Have you always been techie? Like, even when you were young, 10 years old, did technology always interest you?
Yeah, no, I definitely say it has. It's always been something that I'm not very like techie in the sense of it just comes naturally, but I'm just good at figuring stuff out. And so ever since I was like a young kid in like youth group at my church back in the day, I started doing sound and tech back then. And I just kind of like would play with knobs and kind of figure out how things worked. And then that kind of led into like, all the other tech stuff from lighting and production to photography, videography. It's like never came naturally, but it definitely was something that I was able to kind of learn over time.
Wow. So being involved in the church, did that sort of put you in this environment where you could observe the lighting, the soundboards and the cameras and stuff like that? Did that gave you a sort of a primer, it sounds like, for what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's something that I've been doing since I was about a teenager. I work about three kind of like main jobs. One of them is working at a church, overseeing all the sound and tech for the church, and it's definitely been kind of like a gateway for that kind of creative spark when it comes to just lighting and sound design and stuff like that. Because a lot of, what we do in photography, videography, it has to do with like lighting and sound and, how to, draw people in a sense. So yeah, definitely the sound and tech working for a church had a big impact on me.
Do you also enjoy, obviously everybody enjoys movies, but when you watch a movie, do you pay attention to some of those elements?
I would definitely say within like the last 3 years is really when I started to notice certain things, because you know how it goes with social media. When you're into something, when you're photography or sports or whatever it is, I swear, like Instagram just knows to where like I see all these Instagram pages where they post about how movies are made and lighting and how they do certain things. Where the last 3 years, I've definitely noticed that I start to get really like not nitpicky, but I start to really notice different things about if I'm watching a movie or a TV show or whatever it is, that I start to kind of notice those things.
Yeah, I'm not a movie buff by any means, but I recently have been watching these film analyses on The Shining. I've actually never even seen The Shining, but I've been watching these film analyses on it, and Stanley Kubrick it's so detailed and ambiguous and complex, and it makes me wish I could make movies so I'm just an appreciator of it. So I was just curious if just knowing about some of the things you know about the lighting, the filming, and the photography that you do, I would guess that you just enjoy it too when you watch a movie. Has there been a movie recently in the past couple of years that you really were inspired by or you enjoyed a lot because of those elements?
Honestly, like it might be Joker, to be honest. The lighting, first off, the acting is the most like I've never felt uncomfortable watching a movie until I watched Joker because of how like good of an actor he is, and basically just like the lighting design is phenomenal. The sound design on it is definitely one of those movies where like that's probably where like I definitely started to notice a lot more, and that movie really stood out in like all aspects when I watched it, because I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, and I think every time I watch it again, something new pops out, and it's definitely it creates this huge appreciation for the art form of everything that goes into making a movie.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Joker, but I wasn't sure if it was like corny or something. I actually really liked it. I saw it in theaters, and then I ended up renting it, I don't know, 6 months later. Just recently we rented it. I love it. The aesthetics, the grittiness of how they portray New York City in that time frame, the acting. I loved the Joker. As soon as that movie was over, I was like just imagining. I'm not even a filmmaker, but I'm imagining like what I would do with the film. That's how much I liked it. That's cool. I'm happy to hear that you liked it as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So were you born around here? Are you a transplant from somewhere?
So I was born in Washington State, but I've pretty much grown up here in Southern California most of my life. It's Camarillo. I live here in Camarillo, and it's always been home base. But I spent about 2.5 years living in Hawaii, and then I spent some time in Canada, and then I spent about 9 months living in Southeast Asia. And so I'm kind of like I move around a lot. I like to travel, and I love to utilize the photography, videography, especially when it comes to traveling. So home base is definitely Ventura County, but I mean, I just love being able to travel a lot and kind of call different places home for however long I can.
Wow. What took you to those places? Canada, Southeast Asia. You said Hawaii. What took you there?
Yeah. So I first moved to Hawaii in 2012. I moved out there to work with a nonprofit humanitarian organization. It's called Surfing the Nations. And it's basically just an organization where we utilize the sport of surfing as a means to give back to different communities. So they have outreach trips to Indonesia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, North Korea. Like they travel to different countries around the world, and surfing is just kind of like the means to we take medical supplies, clothes, different things, and do projects within different communities. So that kind of led me out to Hawaii. I went out there for a 3-month internship. I spent 2.5 years there. And then I ended up making the hardest decision I've ever had to make, and that was leaving Hawaii. But I left Hawaii in 2015, and then spent about 5 or 6 months up in Canada working for a summer camp. I was offered a position doing a camp counselor and a boat driver, which honestly was like the coolest summer gig I've ever been able to do, because you just drive boats and you just do crazy things for a week at a time with these huge groups of kids. So that was awesome. And then when I went out to Asia, I spent 5 months in Cambodia, and then 2 months in Sri Lanka, and then 1 month in Indonesia and 1 month in Thailand. And all of those countries were all nonprofit humanitarian based. So just working, teaching English to, traveling around and just doing different projects with orphanages and stuff like that. So for the most part, all of it's kind of been nonprofit humanitarian based when it comes to, the places that I've traveled and lived.
Wow. I've been to Hawaii and Canada, barely Canada though. I was if you drive from here straight up to Canada, that's basically where we were on. I think it's Victoria Island. I can't remember what the island is. And it was awesome. When you were in Asia, you said Cambodia, Sri Lanka. Were there any remnants of the Vietnam War? Did you get any Vietnam War vibes? Is there anything alive from that time period still?
Yeah, so when I was in Cambodia, I wouldn't say there's remnants of like the Vietnam War, but there is a remnants of Pol Pot. He was a dictator in Cambodia. And it was just a really gnarly story. If you don't know the history of Cambodia, it's definitely something that is worth kind of learning about. But Pol Pot was basically this dictator that took over the capital and Phnom Penh. And basically, if you were educated, if you wore glasses, if you're a doctor, lawyer, banker, business owner, he basically murdered millions of people. And so he was in control of Cambodia for a number of years. But when I was in Cambodia, obviously, a lot of that had already passed, but they were still in a rebuilding phase to where, it was one of those things you don't really talk about. There's museums and a lot of things that, you can go and see to kind of like experience what the history is really like. But it's one of those unspoken things where anyone that's kind of like, of a certain age and like older, you just really don't say anything about that. You don't ask them questions because it was like, one of the most, horrific genocides. So there's history in Cambodia within itself. And then along with like Sri Lanka, they also spent a lot of times within civil war they're still kind of rebuilding and a lot of this ended kind of like 80s to 90s. So it's really not that long ago.
Right.
But for the most part, yeah, I mean, a lot of the countries that I've been to, they have a history. I haven't been to Vietnam, but the countries that I did go to, they have history within like a lot of civil war and dictators and stuff like that. So there's a lot of rebuilding. You can kind of see the history there, some of the remnants and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty heavy at sometimes when it comes to like, the history of some of these places.
Yeah, I imagine. Did you know anything about that history prior to landing, or did you sort of all of a sudden you're in the middle of it and you're like, wow, there's a lot going on here?
Yeah, no, to be honest, Cambodia, I didn't really know too much about the history, but the awesome part about the organization I worked with out there is I worked for a school teaching English, and it was in southern Cambodia in Sihanoukville. And before they take us down to where we're going to be living, they like to take everybody on these tours where they just kind of give you a brief history of like everything. And so you go to I'm pretty sure it's called S22, which is basically a school where they converted from a school to a prison, and the killing fields and kind of take you through the history of, what really went on in Cambodia. So you kind of have an understanding going into it before you get to like, spending, too much time there to where it's like, they just want you to be aware of it. But yeah, I definitely didn't know a lot of the history before I got there. So it was definitely an eye-opening experience and pretty heavy at certain times, but it was awesome to kind of like know the history of it, but then get to know the people. And it was just amazing to kind of see, how much they've I guess how far they've come from that time.
Yeah, I can imagine how heavy that is. I was imagining myself having all these questions that I would want to ask, but it's such a traumatic period in these people's lives. It would just be offensive to bring that up. I mean, it would just feel so wrong, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you have to be very wise and careful on how you approach certain situations, because obviously it's one of those things where we as outsiders want to know about, what's been going on, and we want to understand, where they're coming from and all these things. But it's at the same time, it's like, you have to be careful that you're not going to try to open up old wounds or bring up memories that they've been, trying to kind of get past and start a new beginning and stuff. So it is tough kind of walking that tight line of like, what's appropriate to ask and what's not appropriate to ask. And like, how can you honor, them within like, wanting to know more about their past, but not wanting to, open up those old wounds.
Yeah. So in terms of yourself, not talking about other countries, your own history, did you enjoy school as a kid?
Yeah. It's funny because I was actually homeschooled my entire life. So
Oh,
from
wow.
ever since a kid to high school, I was homeschooled. In high school, I did independent studies, but I mean that's for the most part, still homeschooled. So I definitely missed out on a lot of experiences that you typically would have in public school. But I was also definitely thankful for the opportunities I had when I was being homeschooled because it definitely opened up some doors to some things that I was passionate about back in that day and that time.
How my first question whenever I hear about homeschooling, which I've heard great things. I've talked to a few people who have been homeschooled and they're successful and rounded, so there's like nothing wrong with it in my opinion. The question I always have though is how do you make friends? Did you make friends through church or what?
Yeah, so there was a couple different ways. Church was a big one. My family's always been very involved within the church, and so that was definitely a big part of being able to grow that friend group. But also we did a homeschooling group that met. It used to meet in Ventura, and then it moved to Oxnard. But that was another way of just being able to and it was kind of nice to have that mutual kind of medium where it's yeah, we don't really see each other all the time, but we're both homeschoolers and we both understand what the struggle is, when it comes to just being stuck at home and wanting to, do stuff. But it was definitely a church, and then the homeschooling group definitely had a big impact on that. So those were definitely probably the two main ways. And then obviously, your neighbors and the people on your street. So when they get out of school, then it's you're running over to their house to hang out.
Did you end up going to college?
So I actually opted out of college. I had an opportunity to race sailboats at a higher level. So I spent a lot of my time out on the ocean. I was racing sailboats anywhere, up and down the coast of Southern California,
What?
Mexico.
Are you kidding me? You raced sailboats.
Yeah, I raced sailboats for a number of years. And that's why I was pretty thankful for homeschooling, because while I was being homeschooled, I was still able to go sail a lot. Even when my friends were in school, I could go down to the harbor and practice and race and sail and stuff. So I think that's why I'm kind of I appreciated homeschooling at that time.
Wow. I'm joking when I say this, but when you say racing sailboats, it's almost like an oxymoron because I imagine sailboats being really slow. Can you really pick up speed in those things, or is it just simply being faster than the other boats?
Both. I mean, when it comes to racing sailboats, obviously what you're trying to do is be faster than all the other boats on the water. But at the same time, especially back in the day, in relation to today's racing sailboats, yeah, they were super slow. But you have hydrofoiling 70-foot, monohulls, the catamarans, and they do 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. They can fly.
Wow.
So, back in the day, yeah, they were slow relative to, today's race boats. But still, even back then, you could get up and go. You can go pretty fast on it. And it really depended on what boat you were on.
How does a person even get into that? How did you find yourself in that position of learning how to sail a boat and then racing a boat? How do you get there?
It's funny you ask, because yesterday I went out to dinner in Ventura, and as soon as I parked and we were walking to where we're going to go eat, I saw my friend Parker Jellison, who he's the guy who first got me into sailing. And I hadn't seen him in quite a while, but he was the guy. He took me sailing once, and then I was completely hooked. And so I ended up taking sailing lessons in Ventura Harbor. And then my same friend who got me into sailing, he got me into racing. And the first time I raced, I knew that that was it. I just wanted to race. And so then it kind of snowballed into, a lot of years of being able to race all over the place.
Wow. So if you ever go to the marina now, or if you're walking along the beach and you're looking out in the ocean, specifically a marina, do you do the boats catch your eye? Are you noticing things that the average person isn't noticing?
Yeah, I mean, I worked for companies, probably like in my high school days, I used to work for a couple companies that worked on power boats, sport fishers and stuff. So I think it's not just sailboats that really catch my eye. It's just boats
Mm.
in general. And so, especially race boats, when I'm walking like in a, bigger harbors like Newport or Marina del Rey, San
Mm.
Diego, like there's so many race boats down in those harbors. So those really catch my eye because there's gorgeous boats. But power boats as well. I actually just purchased a 24-foot power boat, which a lot of
Wow.
people didn't know why because sailing has always been my background. But I mean, boats in general are just a passion of mine as well.
Does that boat that you just bought, does it have a name?
So I bought the boat with my brother-in-law, and I propose we call it Rona, but he said that it might be insensitive, and I was like, fair enough. And so we're actually going to name it Stimulus.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Because it's pretty much my stimulus check.
What harbor is it going to stay? Where will it be?
Ideally, we're going to keep it in Channel Islands Harbor.
Oh, cool. I will have one of these days. You will have to take me out there.
Oh, 100%. Dude, I'm so excited to get in the water so that we can start making some trips.
Oh, man. And do you imagine yourself getting any photography done? Well, actually, I mean, you've been on boats for years now. But yes, do you see this as an opportunity to get photography out there in the ocean?
Yeah, no, I honestly that was definitely a big part because I mean I love surfing, I love being on the water fishing and spear fishing whatever but at the same time with kind of just developing myself as a photographer, I was really excited to kind of get I guess a different perspective of Ventura County because, it's definitely a different perspective when you're out on the water. And so I definitely want to try to utilize, this boat to be able to get some unique perspectives of Ventura from on the ocean and even the Channel Islands. I mean, the islands are beautiful. They're amazing places. And so I definitely want to use photography, use this boat for a means of a different type of photography as much as I can in videography.
This boat, it'll be able to get to the Channel Islands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's basically it has a cuddy cabin, so it has a 2-burner stove, a little sink, a toilet.
Oh,
so it's basically one of those things where we're trying to make weekend trips. So you go out to the islands for 3 days, 2 days. So it's going to be one of those.
Oh my God! See, because I don't know anything about boats. I was imagining just like a little fishing boat with a motor on the back or something. You're saying, I mean, this thing is 24 feet long. You said, right?
Yeah.
That sounds pretty big.
It's definitely bigger than what I was looking for initially, but it was one of those things that it snowballed from being just a little day, center console, fun little boat to it'd be kind of cool to, get a sailboat again. Then it was I kind of want to just be able to go straight to my destination. And then I was it'd be cool to stay at the islands for a weekend. So then, yeah, I actually ended up finding this boat. And so it's definitely one of those, I can spend a weekend out at the islands and, fish, surf, spearfish,
man,
whatever you want, really.
Yeah. In a few months, I'm going to insert myself in some trip you do. This sounds so awesome.
Definitely, man. I mean, with the summer coming up, it's already hot right now. So it's a perfect time to get out on the water.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of photography, when did that interest start for you? Was it purely born out of being around church and cameras, or is this totally separate?
I think it definitely had the church aspect and the kind of tech side of that had a little bit to do with it. But I think it really came on when I was living in Hawaii and I had a couple friends out there that were amazing photographers and videographers, cinematographers. Jeremy Snell is one of them, and Wes Hodge. They're just amazing photographers and cinematographers. And I just it really kind of captured me. And they were one of my friends, Wes Hodge, he was actually shooting on film. So 35 millimeter, old school. And he talked me into buying my first camera, which was a 35 millimeter Nikon FM2. And it was one of those things a lot of people thought it was kind of weird because most people just buy a digital camera. You can point and shoot and then go on with your life. But it was my friend Wes really encouraged me to shoot film because it takes a lot more of, understanding the aspects of photography, from lighting and, your shutter speed, your ISO, your f-stop, and knowing, how to really capture a moment and not just, point, click, and then walk away. So it started in 2015, I'd say, and then it just kind of grew from there.
The recent Ventura March that you had taken photos of, was that film or was that digital?
That was digital. Yeah, I still have my film camera. I take it out for different shoots, just kind of like mellow ones, but definitely for the last 3 protests that I've been to, they've all been digital.
What's your response to people who say that photography is easy? Anyone with an iPhone can be a photographer. What do you say to those people, or what do you think about that kind of question?
No, I 100% agree with them. Photography is easy to an extent. It's anybody can take a photo on their iPhone, and anybody can be a photographer. But what makes it, what kind of draws me in when it comes to photography is really understanding the fact that, like, yeah, anybody can get this shot, but can everybody get this shot? And just like being able to like really look for those shots that like nobody else is getting, or that nobody else can get, or just really looking for those moments that capture an emotion. And so, I mean, it's so easy to just point your camera and click, but it's like, sometimes it just takes like being in that like right spot at the right time and like taking that photo right at the right second. And so I think that's really what like, I kind of chase after, in a sense.
So say for instance, you're on your way home from the Ventura March, you're in the car driving. Do you sort of know what you have on the SD card, or is it just a surprise to you as soon as you open up the files and look at them?
I definitely have specific, like I know that I took a lot of photos that day. And then when I was on my way home, I already knew, because I want to be able to like really be on top of posting and really just getting, these images out, so that, I just want to share with people, what it was like and what happened that day. And so I knew that there were certain times in certain photos, as soon as I took them, it was kind of like, I kind of like stored it in my little library of like photos that I knew that I really wanted to use. And so as soon as I sat down and I dumped all the photos onto my computer, I basically just went to kind of like those times in the day, and I looked for those specific photos. And so I try to pull those first, the ones that I know for a fact that I really want. And then after that, I'll kind of go photo by photo and just, keep and delete the rest and kind of sort through them that way.
Do you have a feeling of, so obviously, you might have taken, I don't know, 500, 200, I don't know how many pictures, but a lot of pictures that day. Do you have this feeling of having to kill your darlings and narrow it down to whatever it is, 20, 50 photos?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely what's hard is, to be honest, like that day I took over 1,000 photos.
Oh, wow.
I was there from like 12 in the afternoon, and I was there for about 3 or 4 hours. And man, it was hot that day, and I was running all over the place, from like the back of the march to the front to the middle to like all over. So I sort through it, and it's one of those things, just like the reality is that, I'll take over 1,000 photos, I'll delete, probably more than half of those. And then it's like, there's still maybe 100 or 200 photos that I really like and I want to keep. But in reality, like I'm only gonna post on, at least on my social media, I'm only going to post like, 30, 40, 50 photos. And so it is kind of hard because it's like, it's hard to choose your favorites, but at the same time, it's like, I don't want to just bombard with like all these photos. So it's kind of tough.
I think that's a great point to make. I don't know that it's a bad thing. I'll just say this about it. That there are a few photographers that I see post, and they post so much, so many, so often, and they could all be great photos. I'm not saying they're even bad photos. I'm just saying, I wonder if quality is better than quantity when it comes to photography. Just because if you're posting thousands and thousands of photos in a period of 3 days, does that sort of numb people to the artwork?
Yeah, I think it can. It is definitely hard because I follow different accounts to where like, I do feel like it's just like, oh my gosh, like I've already seen like, I feel like, 60 photos from like the same photo shoot. Like I wish there was like something else.
Mm.
But at the same time, I guess it just really depends on the subject matter. I mean, if it's like a family photo shoot, like it's like, yeah, it'd be awesome to see like, 2, 3 photos and, oh, cool. Like, what a gorgeous family photo shoot. And then it's like, with something, I don't know, I feel like protests are a little more like, okay, yeah, like I really want to see more. I want to know more. I want to like
Yes,
experience more of
yes.
like that day. So I feel like a lot of it comes down to like the subject matter and what's,
Mm.
what is the subject and, is it something that people are really engaging with right now? And do they want to know about what was going on at, when that photo was taken?
I get this feeling sometimes when I like go to an event, say even the recent protests, where I'll take pictures on my phone and I'm trimming down. So if I took 100, I'm trimming them down to 10 or whatever. And there's a lot of times where I'll take maybe 5, 10 photos in the span of 3 seconds, where I'm click, 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 click,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm looking them over and I'm struggling between 2 or 3 of them. Which one is the perfect frame? What aspects or features of, say, a situation like that help you decide which is better? Is it like lighting, the subtlety of the expression in one photo or the other? What helps you decide between two photos that are nearly identical?
Yeah, so luckily when it comes down to like, because I do the same thing, usually if I'm pointing my camera at someone or something, I'm usually taking like more than one photo. I'll take like a few photos. And like the lighting is easy to decide because it's pretty much going to be consistent. It was taken within like a fraction of a second in a sense.
Yes.
So that's like, no big issue. I think for me, it's definitely the emotion that it kind of evoke or provokes. It's just like, when because facial expressions, like, they happen fast, when somebody's especially at the march in these protests, it's like, when somebody's like, yelling into the microphone, you get a lot of different emotions in a very short amount of
Mm.
time. And so for me, I think it's like, the photos that really show the emotion of what's happening in that moment, because I don't, you know, I don't always want to just show people that are just like standing there with their masks on. And it's kind of hard to know, like, are they like really
Right.
into this, or are they just kind of like, there for, just for the heck of it? And so it's definitely the emotion that I see on, whoever I'm taking a photo of. Like, I think that's really what I try to decide on, because, I want people to kind of experience, that it was a passionate day, and you can tell it from their, their expression or their look.
Yeah. Do you think that photos are, how can I say this? Do you think that photos really can capture emotion and meaning, to where, not to the point where two people think the same exact thing about the photo, but is there really such a thing as a photo really conveying real emotion?
I honestly think there is. There's definitely been, and I think that's part of like what I love about photography is, I know that there have been photos in the past that, like, as soon as I saw it, it was like, that's what I want to do. I want to capture those moments. Like I felt like I was like, a part of that moment when I saw, Nat Geo, obviously everybody knows, National
Yes.
Geographic, and obviously their photography page is, they just post, photos from all these different things around the world. And a lot of those photos that I see on there, like those are, a lot of those it's kind of like, you see certain things and it just makes you want to get up and like do
Mm.
something about it. Or it's like it makes you want
Right.
to like take action. And so I definitely believe that photos can have that effect. It's, and it's powerful when it does, because it's like there's no voice telling you how you should feel. There's no like, sign saying, this is what's going on and what you need to do about it. It's just like you see this photo and it's just like you feel like there's something that needs to be done, and kind of
Mm.
stirs something inside of you.
I get that a lot. I think it's just Nat Geo on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I follow Nat Geo and I follow a lot of safari photography. A pack of painted dogs taking down a buffalo or something. and those photos can be so intense. I mean, some of them are gory, but it's so raw. Like the moments that these photographers are capturing are so raw and real, and it's so down to earth. Like I look at this photo of just like a dog with a spine in its mouth, some deer's spine in its mouth, and it's like not just a photo. It's not just like a gory photo, but it communicates this greater concept of just existing in nature. And I can't even explain it. So I'm just saying that I really feel moved by photography too. And I can't really articulate why.
With photography and doing nonprofit work, a part of, being able to tell a story about what I'm doing in Asia and why am I there is being able to like use photography and show people, these are the people that I'm working with, this is what I'm doing and where I'm at. And people love, photography because it really creates like this connection, regardless of where it is, like whether you're in, the savannah taking photos on a safari or whether you're in Southeast Asia taking photos of, this African jungle or I mean, not African, but Asian jungle or something. It's just one of those things that it kind of transports you to this place. So I definitely think that, photography has that kind of power.
What motivated you to take photos of the protests that, it's, obviously it's only been a couple weeks since they've been going on, but what was in you that made you want to go out and shoot this?
So I think what really like the initial like, oh man, I really want to like go take photos of protests. Like I want to capture these kind of moments is I follow a photographer and I feel so bad because I can't remember his name, but I see his stories all the time. And he's a photographer that he's been in, he was in Hong Kong for the protests in Hong Kong. He's been all over the world. Like he's an amazing photographer and reporter. But for the most part, I mean, I don't know that much about him, but I'm pretty sure he's just freelance. And so I really started seeing his photos and seeing his stories on Instagram. And I was just like, I love this kind of like storytelling where it's just like, it just kind of shows, what's really going on. Like, yeah, we can watch, ABC, NBC, all these different news channels, Fox and CNN, but it's like to see somebody who's just like literally going live on Instagram. It's like, I don't know. It's just something that kind of draws me in a little bit more. But when I started seeing his stuff, I really wanted to kind of go out and take photos and kind of check things out. And then my close friend Aaron Kajumba, he messaged a couple of us friends. We all three of us do photography, videography, and he messaged our group chat on Instagram with like a flyer for one of the protests. I believe it was like the Saturday, maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays ago. A protest down in Oxnard. And so I met up with him and, we took photos and stuff. And then that led to me taking photos on the Wednesday protest right after that. And then that led into Ventura this last Sunday.
I think I went to all of those. I've been to 2 in Oxnard where there was actually a march to the police stations. I went to 2 of those recently and then the Ventura one the other day. And I was trying to capture audio from these events, any speeches I could get. And I think I have photos of you.
Yeah,
I'm probably standing there looking like a nosy SOB with my phone out. And I just had this, like, I reflect on those days and I know I don't think this is the case, but this is sort of my insecurity coming out. And I'm sort of trying to capture these moments too in my own way, just the people's voices and stuff. And I'll come home and I wonder to myself, like, is this good? Not good quality, but what I mean by good is this work worth doing? Are people going to understand where I'm coming from? Are people going to think I'm just being exploitative? Are people going to think I'm just chasing clout? Do you have any insecurities like that about your involvement in these protests?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I know that like before I went to my first protest to take photos, that was kind of one of the things I was worried about is like, I didn't want to come off as like, I'm not going to go post these photos just because like, it's something that is going to draw attention to in my social media or whatever. It was just like, I think because I've been in the nonprofit humanitarian kind of side of things for so long and knowing how impactful, these, photos of these kinds of things can be. I just really want to be able to capture moments because it is a part of history. It's not just like just a one and done kind of thing. Like, I feel like this is such a big deal because it's a global thing. It's a global movement. It's a national movement, statewide, a countywide kind of movement to where it's like, these are special times where it's very unique in history and it's very unique within Ventura County. And so I wanted to be able to capture these kinds of moments. And the first time I went out there, I was kind of hesitant, but it just kind of got to a point where I was just like, I want to be able to take these photos so that people can really see what's going on and see that there are people who are passionate about seeing justice and seeing change. And, as hard as it may be when it comes to just trying to decide. And I've seen a lot of people post on their stories, whether they're doing podcasts or I actually just saw somebody recently, they posted on their story just wondering, hey, is it weird if I just post my normal Instagram photos that have nothing to do with like, protests or anything? Because I feel like it's inappropriate at this time. And, a lot of people are in that place where they just don't know, how to approach certain things. But I just kind of figured, I want to be able to capture these moments that are, hopefully going to, inspire people to use their voice and use their talents and their gifts to bring change or, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, it is tough though.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. That's sort of how I feel too. Like in some way, of course, I want to keep working. It does feel weird to post ordinary things. Like, I don't want to, like, for instance, the last interview that I posted before the movement sort of got steam was with a white woman who is has a doctorate and works at a university. And it's like the polar opposite of who should be heard right now. As inspired as I was by her, that was the last one I did. And then I've really started focusing on people of color, the movement. I want to participate somehow in what's happening. And that's the main reason why I think I don't feel so bad about continuing with the work I'm doing, because there's like a phrase out there that I've been seeing related to protesting and the movement. And it's something to this effect that there are multiple lanes. You can't, not everybody can physically protest. Maybe the way you're involved is by donating. Maybe it's by sharing information, checking in on your family, checking in on your friends that are people of color. And you might feel a similar way. And I feel that this is what I can contribute, finding out what the voices in this movement are saying and how they feel. Do you have that sense about yourself that this is your way of participating in this movement?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that it's definitely I want to be able, like, I just don't want to go and just kind of like keep shouting, these, different things, which I definitely agree with and I do. But at the same time, it's like I have a talent that I feel like is something that can be used to really tell a story. And to be completely honest, as a photographer and videographer, like, I feel like we have a responsibility, especially when it comes to just telling a story that really shows, what's really going on. Because I've seen photos that, as a creator and as a photographer, they really bummed me out because unless you're a photographer, you won't understand the fact that like some of these photos are taken so far out of context. And there was one specific photo that really just like bummed me out in the sense of like, I saw it posted in the story underneath of it. It's just like, this. And if you look at the photo, like there's so much to it to where, the subject is, a father and a son, and the boy is sitting on the dad's shoulders. And then to the right of them is a police officer with like a tear gas gun or something. And
I've seen that photo. Yes.
So for me, I genuinely believe that like if you actually really look at the photo, like from the father and like the son on his shoulders, the depth, the father and son are closer to the photographer. The police officer is further back, and like his eyes, like they're not like looking at the father and son. So it's like
wow.
like and honestly, like I know that, like, some people may be offended by that, or not agree with it, and that's understandable. Like, I don't know, I wasn't there to take the photo, I wasn't there around when it was, taken, but I genuinely, from my experience in photography and all that, I just don't believe that, like, that photo was portrayed in a right way. Like, I don't think that was the situation. And so as a photographer, it's hard because, things, if like, you can get really creative, and you can, like, I can make things seem to be one way when they're really not. It just takes the right angle, the right, lens, the focal length, like, to make something look like it is or isn't. And so as a photographer, I feel like, especially for those of us who are just freelance, we have an opportunity. Like, we're not required by anybody to, take certain photos so that they can post something that looks a certain way. And so I think for me, I think it kind of comes down to that, is like just feeling like, I want to, do my part in just telling a true story of, what I'm experiencing at these rallies and protests and marches, and just kind of sharing, what I'm seeing, and, whether it's good or bad. Like, I just want to, show people, like, this is just what I've experienced.
Yeah. And now that you're mentioning it, I sort of am seeing a big picture here now. I think back to, say, the civil rights movement of the 60s. What would we know about it? Maybe the news is capturing a lot of stuff too, but I'm thinking that if the photographers aren't out there, the videographers aren't out there, the reporters aren't out there, how else are we going to refer to this in the future? So I think it is very important that you're out there, that people are out there documenting this. Otherwise, it just becomes a story lost in time somewhere.
Yeah. And it's definitely one of those things where, like, we live in a day and age where it's like, the amount of information that you can put out in, like, a very short period of time is, like, it's unbelievable. And so to be able to be a part of, like, taking, photos from, like, something that, was very powerful, like the Ventura protest, where there's probably, I think they said, over 1,200 people. And it was like, I want to be able to, like, utilize my skill set and the things that I'm passionate about to be able to, like, take photos, go home, and basically get those, posted and out there, so people can kind of see, this is what it was like, this is what's happening, and just to kind of share and be another voice, or a different form of a voice.
Has anybody reached out or commented on the fact that you're showing people's faces, therefore their identities? And I ask that because I recently posted a few things, and someone commented, like, hey, like, these people are super identifiable, and cops have been known to give tickets or to target these people. Have you had any issues with that?
So nobody's asked, and I make it very clear, if somebody was ever to ask me, hey, like, I need you to take this photo down, like, I would take it down immediately. And I have had that conversation. I've talked to a number of other photographers and people kind of, like, in the same field, and because we all kind of express the same concerns. And so it was like, it's really hard because, being in, like, a public place, it is, there's really nothing that's holding us back from taking a photo of people outdoors and stuff. But at the same time, we have had that conversation about, like, not even cops, but somebody brought up, like, what if, there's, like, a KKK member, like, somebody of, like, that kind of, like, group or something that might want to just, like, utilize these kind of photos to target people. And it's been really tough. But at the same time, I think a lot of us really just came to the conclusion that, like, we want to be able to tell this story, that in its truest form, in a way that's going to be honoring to, it's a lot of people that go out there, a lot of people that take time out of their day to go to these, marches and rallies and protests. Like, they want to be heard, and they want people to know that, like, we're not just showing up with, like, 5 people. It's like, we're 20, 1,200 strong. And so it is kind of hard, but I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from a lot of people about the photos from the last 3 protests. And a lot of people have asked for their photos because they want to post them on their own social media. But, it is one of those things where, like, if anyone was to approach me about, like, that kind of issue, I would have no problem with taking photos down and being more mindful of how to, how to choose, what to and to not post. But I haven't had anyone approach me or message me about it yet.
Yeah, I've sort of come to the same conclusion basically. The way I see it is, if somebody tells me like, dude, yeah, no problem, take it down. With what I'm doing, where I'm recording audio, first of all, I just don't even want to know who's speaking. Or of course I do want to know who's speaking, but I don't list who's speaking because it's just easy. It's just easy for me to not have to mention that. It's just audio. It's less of a risk in my mind than like a photo, which is more clearly identifiable. But I've sort of concluded that by being there in the first place, that sort of assumes that it assumes that you're okay with people taking photos, or you're in a public arena is what I'm getting at. To be surprised that you're in a photo maybe doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's always going to be one of those things where you're just kind of like unsure, but at the same time, like I don't want to live in fear of posting something that I feel is like telling a story of a movement or of something that is people are passionate about this, and so I would hate to just be so fearful of this and that, and the list can go on and on, but. If I'm going to continue to post, photos from, the protests and the ones that I go to in the future. And then, if anyone has any issues, I have no problem with adjusting and taking stuff down and, posting different things. But I think, a lot of people want, they want these photos out there. They want to be, a part of like sharing, this powerful story.
I've seen a few photos. They might have even been yours. I'm not sure, but it was from the first. It was from the second Oxnard protest that I went to, and it was the protest where at some point it ended up at, I think it's called like 5 Point intersection in Oxnard. Yeah. And there was sort of something of a standoff. There were police officers on motorcycles, and then the crowd. And I saw a photo where the photographer had to have been behind the officers, and through between the officers, you see the crowd. So what that means is the photographers walked right through the police officers or around them. And I just imagined how frightening that is. And I say that because as soon as I saw those cops pull up, I got a little nervous, even though they weren't close by. It's tense. So I wonder, do you feel threatened or fearful at all in that kind of situation where you're sort of documenting these things and you're near police officers?
At that moment, because it might have been my photo. I do have a photo where I started off when it first got to 5 Points. I was kind of like on the side where the cops were further back, and I took a photo of like the huge line of people on their knees. And so that one, I was between the protesters and the cops, and I didn't go behind the cops on that point because they were so far back. But I started to see the crowd kind of start moving to the right, and I realized the cops were a lot closer right there. So I ran I like sprinted over in that direction, and I started off to the side, and then I kind of like crossed between the protesters and the cops, but eventually I made my way behind them. And then I started taking photos because I felt like that perspective was just really powerful to see. And it was kind of tense at first. And, in that moment, I don't think I really thought much about it because I've always just kind of felt like, just fake it till you make it. Like if they see you're just taking photos, then they're just going to like assume that like, this kid's just taking photos for, I don't know, whoever, like a news media or something like that. So I just like try to like do whatever I want until somebody says like, go over here or do that or don't do that. But it was a tense moment. Actually, when those cops actually left, I was still behind them. And one of the motorcycle cops it obviously like, I was in the middle of the street, but like he kind of whipped around real fast, and I almost kind of got clipped by him. But I don't blame him. Like he was, I'm literally standing in the middle of the road, but it was a tense moment, and I was definitely glad to capture, because some of those photos are definitely some of my favorites in the sense of just like, I felt like they really showed a powerful message, in those, especially on 5 points, because it's very recognizable.
Yeah. It might have been your photo that I saw immediately after that. We walked through the alley. Are we thinking of the same moment?
Yeah. I guess they wanted to keep going straight towards the cops, but then, we made that weird detour through the alley.
Yeah. And there were people like on their balconies, like taking photos and stuff.
Yeah.
Matthew, it's been really nice talking to you. I love more than anything, maybe when the person that I talk to ends up being like 100 times more interesting. Like I didn't know you raced boats or went to Cambodia or anything like that. So, it's always such a nice feeling it's a surprise for me. I just have one more question for you, and you can answer it any way you like. Matthew, who are you?
I feel like, I'm simply a faith-filled 28-year-old kid who just loves to take photos and capture moments that tell a story, whether that's through videography or photography.